Hello, everybody. I hope you had a great weekend. We are back at it with math. We're still pushing through. I hope everybody is doing okay. Remember, you can always reach out to me if things are getting tough or you need someone to talk to. I'm on Remind, I'm on Teams, I've got Skyward Messenger. However you need to reach out to me. If you need to talk to me about anything and everything, I'm available to you. We're just continuing to work through this, figuring everything out. But today we're starting our 12C notes. We're just pushing through. So let's start. So 12C, we have solve quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. This is one of my favorite things. I don't know why. Right, so we've learned just by factoring, we've done completing the square, we've done taking the square root, which is what we've kind of been doing a little bit with our imaginary numbers and all that kind of stuff. Another way we can solve them is with something called the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula, let me write it out for you. So it is x equals negative b plus or minus, you know what, I might need some more room here. I'm going to kind of write it up over here just so I can zoom in. So it is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. You know what? I'm going to give you all a little song because that's the way I learned it so that I remember it. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. You know what? Put me on iTunes. I'll make a Spotify, song if you want me to. There it is for you. This looks like a lot of things are going on. So if we look at, let's say, a quadratic equation. So remember we have ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So, right, if we're solving it, right, we've got the number in front of x squared a, the number in front of x b, and then the c. So, in your formula where it looks for, over here we've got a that shows up a couple times, b shows up a couple times, and then c shows up. So, for those numbers, you're going to plug in the numbers that you see for a, b, and c from your quadratic equation that it gives you, and plug them into your formula. So that's kind of what our first example is having you do. So write the equation that represents the setup to solving the following using the quadratic formula. Do not actually solve it. So we're just like plugging it in. So 10 is our A, 7 is B, right? So 10 is the A, positive 7 is the B, negative 1 is your C. So we're just going to plug them into our formula. So x equals negative b, so b is 7 right now, so it would be negative 7 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 7 squared, minus 4ac, so a is 10, c is negative 1, all over 2a, and then a is 10. I'm so sorry for the amount y'all are going to hear me sing. I'm already just sorry. So that's all it wants you to do is just set it up to how you would solve it. Let's do the next one. So we got a couple more negatives on this one. So a is negative 5, b is negative 8, and c is a positive 9. So let's go through and plug it into our formula. So x equals negative b. So it's already negative, so now it's going to be a positive 8. Plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 8 squared minus 4ac. A is negative 5, c is 9. I'm just putting each one in parentheses so everything stays separate, but it's multiplication all over 2a. Boom, there she is. So for those that just wanted you to set it up, right, next one, it says, given the following equation, identify A, B, and C. So for this one, it's not just A is negative 3, B is 7, and C is 2, right? They kind of scrambled up your equation a little bit. right? So it's not in order. You've got your x squared in the middle, your x all the way over here, and just the plain number all the way over here. So just make sure you're paying attention. So the one that's in front of the x squared, that wasn't a very good circle. The one in front of your x squared is always your a. So a is 7. The number that's in front of your x is b. So your b is 2. And then your naked number, the one that doesn't have any variables, is your c. So c is actually -3. Wild. Alright, so this one actually says solve for the variable using the quadratic formula. So we're actually solving it this time. So we're setting up our equation, then going through and actually solving. So there's an invisible 1 in front of the x. So that is your a. Your b is 8. And your c is 12. So let's go through and plug it in. So x equals -b. So -8 plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4, and then a is 1, c is 12, all over 2a, and so a is just 1. So we're going to go through and actually solve it, right? So we got to simplify it a little bit. So we're going to leave the -8, the plus or minus, but we're going to kind of simplify what's under this square root. So 8 squared is 64, and then 4 times 1 times 12 is 48, and then that is all over 2. And we're going to keep going, simplify it again. What's 64 minus 48? I don't actually know off the top of my head. 16. Great. Plus or minus the square root of 16 all over 2. We're running out of room a little bit. Let's get the eraser, make this a little bit smaller so we can have a little more room. So it's -8 plus or minus. Okay, and then square root of 16 is 4. So it already has that plus or minus for you all over 2. So this is when we kind of separate it into our two separate things, right? Because we have the plus or minus. So another thing we can do though before you do that is both things you can actually divide by 2. So -8 divided by 2 is -4, and then 4 divided by 2 is 2. So this is where we can kind of break it up. So we do -4 plus 2, and then -4 minus 2, because we have that plus or minus, right? So right, it's that plus or minus that we're kind of splitting up here. So -4 plus 2 is -2, and -4 minus 2 is -6. So that gives us our answers. So with this, we know that x equals -2 and x equals -6 for our solution. So this one, we have actual whole number answers. So we might not have had to go through and do the whole quadratic formula for this one. We could have just said, what can we multiply by 12? Two things we can multiply by 12 that add up together to make 8. 6 and 2 would have been easier for this one, and we wouldn't have had to go through this whole entire thing. But for some of them, it doesn't always work out that way. So we have to actually go through and solve it using the quadratic formula, and your answers might not always be pretty, okay? So let's do our next one. So your A is 2, your B is -7, and your C is 3. So we have x equals -b. So a -7 is a +7. Plus or minus the square root of b squared, so -7 squared, minus 4ac. So a is 2, c is 3, all over 2a, and a is 2. Right, so now we just go through and just keep simplifying what we've got. So 7 plus or minus, all right, -7 squared. So if you don't know off the top of your head, right, just make sure you're doing it in parentheses. So -7 in parentheses squared, 49, minus 4 times 2 times 3. So 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 3 is 24, all over 2 times 2, which is 4. Keep simplifying. Here, let's scooch it over here a little bit so we can save as much room as we can. So 7 plus or minus the square root, 49 minus 24 is 25, all over 4. Okay. Well, square root of 25 is actually 5, so it already has that plus or minus, so you don't have to worry about doing that. So for this one, right, so with this one, 7 can't be divided by 4 and 5 can't be divided by 4. So there's not really much we can do with this one in order to simplify it more. So now we kind of just break it into our two different solutions. So we're breaking down that plus or minus. So we're doing 7 plus 5 divided by 4, and then 7 minus 5 divided by 4. Okay, so you're breaking it down. The plus is one of them, and then the minus is the other one. So 7 plus 5 is 12, and we divide that by 4, which is 3. And then we have 7 minus 5 over 4. So 7 minus 5 is 2 divided by 4. You can do the fraction, you can do the decimal. So I'm going to do which is a half if you simplify it, or 0.5. Either way you want to do it. So this tells you your two answers. So x is 3 and x is 0.5. You can leave it as the fraction, do the decimal, however you want to do it, totally up to you. So we've got a little bit left, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do a part 2 of this video, okay? I'll be back in a second.